Hey, Rogue Valley Fellowship. Good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Hope you've been able to get out and enjoy the summer a little bit. It's time once again to spend a little bit of time reflecting on this past week's sermon. But before we get into the sermon recap, check in with one another in your missional community group, spend some time praying for whatever needs may exist there, and then read John chapter 12, verses 1 through 11 to just refresh your memory. So the sermon this past week was out of John chapter 12, and it's the story of Mary anointing Jesus' feet with really expensive perfume and washing his feet with her hair, and then people's responses to what was happening here in this story. And throughout the book of John, he's trying to prove that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And in this passage in particular, it points us to consider what is an appropriate response to Jesus' resurrection life and power that he lovingly offers us. And so we're coming off the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead, and Jesus is now traveling back to Bethany to visit Mary and Martha and Lazarus. So we see how each of them respond to Jesus. Now that he has come and raised Lazarus from the dead, they've experienced his power, his loving resurrection life that he gave to Lazarus. And so we watch them each respond to who Jesus is and the type of love that he extends. So in verses 1 through 3, we see Mary and her act of adoration. She anoints Jesus' feet with perfume, and that perfume is worth an entire year's worth of wages. So she honors Jesus, humbles herself, washes his feet with her hair. And at this time, we also see a quick mention in the text that Lazarus is simply reclining at the table. And so we see Lazarus, who has experienced Jesus' resurrection power and the life that he gave back to Lazarus, and now Lazarus simply just wants to be near Jesus. He wants to be with the one who gives life. And then in verses 4 through 6, Judas rebukes Mary for using all this perfume on Jesus' feet. And he says, you know, we could have sold that and given the money to the poor. But what's really being pointed out here isn't Judas being altruistic and actually caring for the poor. He simply sees this as an opportunity to climb the social ladder. So he's being a hypocrite here. He doesn't really care for the poor, nor is he really responding to Jesus' love in a meaningful way. He simply wants to use the person of Jesus, use his association with Jesus to become well known in the community. And so Judas responds with hypocrisy, as Mary responds in adoration. Lazarus responds in intimacy, and their sister Martha is said that she's once again cooking for everybody and being hospitable. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So Judas, he rebukes Mary, and then Jesus responds to Judas, and he says, whoa, hold on a second. What she's done here is a good thing. The poor you will always have with you. And so what Jesus is saying here, he defends Mary and says that she's actually saved this perfume, albeit probably unwittingly, according to God's sovereign plan, to prepare his body for burial. So her act of love and devotion was part of God's sovereign plan to kind of prepare Jesus for his upcoming death and burial. And so the closing thoughts from this week's sermon, when we consider the idea is what is a good and proper response to the love of Jesus, to his life-giving love, we saw three responses in the text. First of all, we see a response of intimacy. Lazarus was given new life by Jesus. He experienced Jesus' resurrection love and power. And so Lazarus' response was intimacy. He wanted to be with Jesus. He wanted to be near Jesus. He wanted to know him closely. Secondly, we see another response of devotion. Martha experienced Jesus' life-giving love and power as Lazarus was raised from the dead, and her response was to sacrificially love and serve other people. As Christ serves her, so she serves others. And it'd be easy to look at Martha and just say that she's too worried about other things that are going on, but this is her act of love and response to Jesus' love, to serve other people, to be hospitable, and to treat them well. And third, we see a response of adoration from Mary. So Mary sees the power of Jesus as he raises Lazarus from the dead, and her response to him is to adore him, to lift him high, to honor him, and to humble herself in his presence. So that's kind of a recap of the sermon. So we just have three questions for you this week to help you reflect on this idea of a wholehearted response to the love of Jesus. So question number 1 is this. When and how have you experienced the love of Jesus through his resurrection power in your life? So when and how have you experienced the love of Jesus in your life? So just as Jesus gave Lazarus life, raised him up from the dead, so the resurrection power of God is alive in us through the love of Jesus. How did you initially experience the love of Jesus, and how have you experienced the love of Jesus since then in your life? Just take some time and discuss that. Question number 2 is this. Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and Judas all responded to Jesus and his love differently. So what ways do you tend to respond to Jesus' love and power in your life? And why is that response most natural to you? So do you find yourself normally responding to Jesus by serving others? Are you one who seeks intimacy on a regular basis? Are you one who enjoys to worship and adore Jesus for who he is? What is your response to Christ's love? And why do you think that one is the most natural response in your life? And question number 3 is this. Intimacy is a concept in our culture that is often skewed and misunderstood. So here's the question. How does it strike you to know that Jesus desires intimacy with you? Why does it strike you that way? And what does it look like to seek and experience intimacy with Jesus? So take some time and discuss those things. All right, as you close your time today, why don't you spend some time praying? Ask the Spirit to help you respond to the love of Christ in meaningful ways, and maybe spend some time just recounting the ways that you have experienced Christ's love and offering thanks and gratitude to him for how he has loved you. So you can spend some time praying with one another. Next week, we're going to be finishing up John chapter 12, so you can feel free to read ahead and study there. Hope you have a great week. Grace and peace.